Elena had never believed in fate, but the universe seemed to have a strange sense of humor that evening. The ballroom shimmered with gold light and laughter, a haze of perfume and polished shoes, string quartets and champagne flutes. She was there for the wedding of her closest friend. Trying her best to enjoy the celebration, to smile when people toasted and danced, to ignore the echo of a name she had promised herself she would never think about again. That promise lasted until she saw him. Michael stood across the room, just past the sea of swirling gowns and black suits, laughing with the groom. The years had added new lines to his face, gentle ones, the kind that come from smiling too often. But there was still that same intensity in his eyes, that same quiet gravity that had drawn her in long ago. He hadn't noticed her yet. She wished he wouldn't. She turned toward the window, pretending to be fascinated by the drizzle against the glass. It was a losing battle. Her pulse quickened, her throat dry. She remembered the last time she had seen him 3 years ago, in a crowded cafe where they had said words that sounded like closure but felt like unfinished sentences. She'd built a new life since then, a new apartment, new job, new rhythm. Yet seeing him there cracked through all that stability like a fault line reopening. "Elena?" The voice came softly, uncertainly, but it hit her like a chord she still knew by heart. She turned. Michael stood there, holding a glass of champagne, his smile hesitant but warm. For a heartbeat, the noise of the room faded. She noticed how his tie was slightly crooked, how he rubbed the back of his neck the way he always did when nervous. The familiarity hurt and comforted her all at once. "Michael," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "It's been a while." 3 years, he replied. "Give or take a few months." She managed a small laugh. "You still counting?" "Some things are hard to forget." His eyes met hers briefly, then shifted to the crowd as if afraid of being caught looking too long. They talked politely about work, mutual friends, the ceremony. Every word was safe, every smile practiced. But beneath that small talk, memories stirred like embers under ash. She remembered late-night drives and unfinished songs on his guitar, the way he used to look at her as though she were both the question and the answer. He had been her greatest comfort and her hardest lesson. When the first dance began, Elena tried to excuse herself, but he stopped her gently. "Would you like to dance?" Her instinct was to say no. The thought of being that close again terrified her. But something in his voice, the sincerity, the quiet plea, made her nod before she could think twice. On the dance floor, the music slowed. She placed her hand in his, surprised by the familiarity of the touch. His other hand hovered respectfully at her back, just enough to guide her through the rhythm. They moved cautiously, two people relearning the language they'd once spoken fluently. "You look happy," he said. "I'm trying to be," she answered. He nodded, his smile faint. "I hope he treats you well." "There is no he." That caught him off guard. His steps faltered for half a beat. "Oh." The silence that followed said more than either of them could. It wasn't awkward, just heavy with what-ifs. When the song ended, Elena stepped back, not sure what to do with the ache in her chest. She should have walked away then, back to safety, to the version of herself that didn't feel this exposed. Instead, she found herself saying softly, "It's strange, seeing you again." "It feels like no time has passed," he admitted. "And also like an entire lifetime." They both laughed quietly at that, two people sharing the same bewilderment at how love could remain dormant yet alive. Like an old melody waiting to be played. Across the room, someone called his name, breaking the moment. He glanced toward the voice, then back at her, his expression uncertain. "Maybe we could catch up later?" "Just talk." Elena hesitated. She should have refused. She knew how easily old stories could rewrite themselves. But something inside her, curiosity, longing, unfinished business, made her nod. "Maybe," she said. her voice soft, unreadable dot as he walked away. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The air suddenly felt heavier, her heartbeat louder. The reunion she had dreaded was now behind her. Yet it felt like something much bigger had only just begun. Elena found herself in the garden an hour later, away from the laughter and music that spilled from the ballroom. The air was cool now, carrying the scent of wet roses and champagne. A string of lights wound through the hedges, glowing like captured fireflies. She had come out for air, or at least that's what she told herself. In truth, she was hiding from her own thoughts. The echo of Michael's voice still lingered in her mind, his hesitant smile replaying like a song she couldn't turn off. She hated that she remembered the exact sound of his laughter, the warmth in it, the way it used to make her feel like everything in the world could be okay. It had taken years to forget those details, or at least to pretend she had. The crunch of footsteps on the gravel behind her made her stiffen. "I thought I might find you here," Michael said. His voice quieter now, stripped of the easy charm he'd worn inside. Elena turned slowly. He looked different out here, less polished, more real. The shadows softened his edges. And for a moment she saw not the man at the wedding, but the boy she used to know. The one who'd believed he could fix anything with an apology and a promise. "Following me now?" She said lightly, but her tone didn't carry the bite she intended. "Maybe," he admitted. "But I just wanted to talk. Properly this time." She crossed her arms, half defensive, half anchoring herself. "About what? The weather? The music? Or the part where you left without saying goodbye?" He winced at that. "I deserve that." "You did," she said. "And a few more things, probably." For a moment neither spoke. The night hummed softly around them, the wind rustling through trees, laughter from the ballroom faint and far away. Michael took a breath. "I was scared, Elena. I thought if I stayed, I'd hold you back. You had that job offer in Paris, that whole future lined up. I didn't want to be the reason you didn't go." She looked at him, incredulous. "So you disappeared instead? You made the choice for both of us." "I know," he said, his voice rough. "And I've regretted it every day since." Elena turned away, gripping the cold iron railing by the path. The lights reflected faintly in her eyes. "Regret doesn't fix anything, Michael. It doesn't undo what it broke." He stepped closer, careful not to touch her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know the truth." "The truth?" She repeated. "The truth is you left. And I had to learn how to live like that didn't destroy me." Her voice shook slightly at the end, and she hated that he could still make her feel so exposed. Michael's eyes softened. "You were always stronger than me. Maybe that's what scared me most." For a moment, silence stretched between them again, long and trembling. The sound of rain began to fall, lightly soft drops brushing the garden leaves. Elena sighed and ran a hand through her hair. "You think saying all this now makes it better?" "No," he said simply. "But it's a start." Something in his tone stopped her from answering. He sounded older, tired, like a man finally admitting that he'd spent years pretending not to bleed. She looked up at him then, really looked. The years had changed him, not just his face, but the weight in his shoulders, the careful way he chose his words. The boy who had once run from his own heart was gone, replaced by someone quieter, humbler, and yet part of her still ached, because she could feel the pull of what they'd been, and the danger of what they could become again. "You know," she said softly, "when I got that job in Paris, I waited 2 weeks before accepting it. I kept thinking you'd change your mind, that you'd come back." He swallowed hard. "I almost did. I drove halfway across town one night, but I couldn't make myself knock on your door." "Coward," she said, but her voice was gentle now. "Yeah," he admitted with a sad smile. "That's fair." The rain grew steadier, misting their hair and shoulders. Neither of them moved to go inside. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know what you want from me, Michael." He hesitated. "Maybe just a chance to make things right. To prove that I've changed." Elena's gaze held his for a long time, searching for something she wasn't sure she wanted to find. "You can't rewrite the past," she said. "No," he agreed. "But maybe we can start a new page." She looked away, blinking back the sting of tears. "We'll see." And as the rain fell harder, soaking through the quiet garden, the distance between them felt smaller, yet infinitely more dangerous. The storm came suddenly, as if summoned by the conversation itself. One moment, the garden was a quiet refuge lit by soft lanterns. The next, the wind surged through the trees, scattering petals and bending branches. The first crack of thunder rolled across the sky, low and restless. Elena looked up. "We should get inside," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Michael nodded, glancing toward the ballroom doors. "Yeah, come on." They started toward the building just as the rain came down in sheets, cold and heavy. Guests laughed and hurried for cover, tuxedos and gowns disappearing behind the double doors. By the time Elena and Michael reached the veranda, they were drenched. The space was empty now except for them, the air thick with the scent of wet stone and roses. Elena stood near one of the wooden pillars, water dripping from her hair onto her shoulders. "Of course," she said wryly, "you and I would end up caught in the middle of a storm." Michael gave a breathless laugh. "Some things never change." She turned toward him, her expression softer but wary. The distance between them was small, too small. She could see the drops of rain clinging to his eyelashes, the rise and fall of his chest as he caught his breath. "Why does it always have to be like this?" she asked quietly. "Us, the timing, everything." He didn't answer right away. The storm rattled the roof above them, a wild percussion that matched the rhythm of her heart. Finally, he said, "Maybe because we never really finished what we started." Elena exhaled slowly, her arms wrapping around herself. "We did finish it." "You made sure of that." He took a step closer. "Did we, though? Because it doesn't feel like it's finished now." The words hung between them, dangerous and fragile. She shook her head. "You can't just walk back into my life and pretend nothing happened." "I'm not pretending," he said, his voice low, steady. "I remember every word we said, every silence. I've lived with it. I thought about what I'd say if I ever got the chance to stand in front of you again." "And?" she asked. He met her gaze, rain streaking down the glass behind him like tears. "And now that I'm here, everything I practice sounds wrong. Because the truth is simple, Elena, I never stopped caring. Not for one day." The confession hit her harder than she expected. She turned away, gripping the railing to steady herself. "You don't get to say that," she whispered. "Not after everything." "I know," he said. "But it's still true." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the steady drum of rain. Elena could feel the old ache in her chest, the one she had buried years ago under new routines and false calm. She had built walls, strong ones, but his words found the cracks. She turned back toward him, her eyes fierce now. "You think a few honest words make up for years of silence? You think you can just appear out of nowhere and make me feel like this again?" "No," he said. "I don't think I can make you feel anything. His voice caught. "I just want you to know that I see what I did. I see how much it cost you. And I'm sorry I let fear decide for me." Something inside her softened, against her will. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't asking her to forgive him. He was just standing there honest, open, soaked through, finally telling the truth she had needed all those years ago. The thunder cracked again, closer this time, and she flinched. He instinctively stepped forward, his hand reaching toward her arm before stopping short. "Elena," he said quietly. Are you cold?" She hesitated, then nodded. Without a word, he shrugged off his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. It was warm despite the rain and smelled faintly of cedar and something achingly familiar. For the first time that night, she didn't pull away. They stood there together, the storm raging around them. The rest of the world blurred behind a curtain of rain. The air between them was charged, not with anger now, but with possibility. Fragile and trembling, she looked up at him, meeting his eyes. "You can't fix what's broken with apologies," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "But maybe I can stop breaking it further." And somehow, that simple sentence did more to unsteady her than any grand declaration could have done. As lightning flashed over the horizon, Elena realized she wasn't sure what scared her more, the thought of letting him in again, or the thought of walking away when she still could. The storm outside roared, but inside that small shelter, everything went quiet. The rain had softened to a whisper by the time they went quiet. The thunder moved farther away, leaving only the rhythm of droplets sliding down the veranda roof. Lantern light flickered faintly across their faces, casting them in gold and shadow. Elena held Michael's jacket tightly around her shoulders, the warmth of it fading as the cool night air settled in. Her pulse still hadn't slowed. Every part of her wanted distance, wanted to step back, to rebuild the walls she'd spent years constructing. But something in his eyes held her there, caught between caution and gravity. "Do you ever think," she began softly, "how different things would have been if you hadn't left?" Michael looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Every day." His honesty caught her off guard. She wasn't sure she wanted to hear the truth. But now that it had started, she couldn't stop. "I used to replay it all in my head," she said. "The arguments, the good parts, the silence. I'd tell myself that losing you was the lesson I needed to learn." "Was it?" he asked quietly. Elena's eyes dropped to the ground. "Maybe, or maybe it just taught me how to stop hoping." Michael stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You shouldn't have had to learn that because of me." She didn't reply right away. The sound of rain on leaves filled the silence. Her heart was beating too fast again, and she hated that it still responded to him like this. "I told myself you were gone for good," she said finally, "that you didn't love me enough to stay. It was easier that way. Anger is easier to live with than wondering." He nodded slowly. "You deserved better than wondering." For a moment, the words just hung there, simple, heavy, true. Then Michael took a deep breath. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you, Elena. I left because I loved you too much to ask you to wait for someone who didn't know who he was yet." Her breath caught. "You think that makes it better?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "It makes it worse. Because I thought I was protecting you. But really, I was protecting myself from failing, from not being enough, from seeing you choose a life that didn't have room for me." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You were never supposed to be perfect. You were just supposed to stay." His jaw tightened. "I know. And I didn't. That's on me." The rain picked up again, a soft drizzle that blurred the edges of the night. The scent of wet earth filled the air, grounding them in the moment. Elena looked out toward the garden, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know what it felt like? Waking up the next morning and realizing you were gone?" He closed his eyes briefly. "I can guess." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You can't, because you left before you had to feel it. Before you had to open a drawer and find everything that used to belong to someone who wasn't coming back." Her words trembled, but she didn't cry. The tears had dried years ago. What remained was quieter, deeper, a scar rather than a wound. Michael stepped forward then, slowly, as though approaching something fragile. "You can hate me if you need to. You have every right to. But I need you to know I never stopped." He hesitated. His throat tightened. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Never stopped what? His voice broke as he said it. Loving you. The words came out like a release, raw and unguarded. There was no music behind them, no grand gesture. Just truth small, devastating, and real. For a moment, everything was still. The air itself seemed to pause. Elena's expression shifted, not surprise, not anger, but something heavier. You don't get to say that after all this time, she whispered. You don't get to just open that door again. I know, he said, but it's the only honest thing I've said in years. She turned away, pressing her hand to her chest as if to steady something breaking loose inside her. I don't know what to do with that, she murmured. You don't have to do anything, he said gently. Just hear it. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything neither of them had said before. When she finally looked back at him, her eyes were softer, though her guard was still up. I thought I stopped loving you a long time ago, she said. His breath hitched. And? She hesitated, then shook her head. And I'm not sure I ever really did. The storm outside had nearly passed, but the one between them had only just begun. For a long time, neither of them moved. The air under the veranda was thick, with rain, with memory, with everything that had just been said and everything that couldn't be taken back. The wedding music had faded into the distance, replaced by the quiet hum of the storm's retreat. It was that kind of silence that made you aware of your own breathing, your own pulse, your own uncertainty. Elena leaned against the wooden post, her arms folded tight as though holding herself together. Michael stood a few steps away, unsure whether to approach or retreat. His confession still hung between them, fragile and unclaimed. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. You shouldn't have said that. I know, he said, but I couldn't keep not saying it. She laughed once, bitterly. And what now, Michael? Do you expect me to say it back? To pretend the last 3 years didn't happen? He shook his head. No, I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know. Helena's eyes glinted in the half-light. Knowing doesn't help. It just hurts all over again. I'd rather be honest and hurt you, he said quietly, than keep lying to you by staying silent. That made her look up, her anger softening just slightly, because the old Michael would have stayed silent. The one standing before her now seemed older, humbler, different. She didn't want to admit it, but he was right. Still, she said nothing. The silence between them thickened, stretching taut as wire. A gust of wind blew across the veranda, sending droplets scattering off the roof. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, someone inside the ballroom cheered, a toast, a dance, a celebration she no longer felt connected to. Michael rubbed a hand over his face and sighed. I don't know what I thought would happen tonight. I didn't come here looking for a second chance. Then why are you here? She asked, her tone quiet but steady. He hesitated, searching for the right words. Because I wanted to stop running from the truth. From you? From who I was back then. Elena studied him for a moment. You think facing me fixes that? No, he said. But it's a start. She shook her head and looked out toward the rain again. You always say that something's a start. You said it when you left too, that it was a start for both of us. A clean break. He flinched. And it wasn't. It was an ending, Michael. You just didn't have to live through it. The words landed hard. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the truth in her voice silenced him. Instead, he just nodded. You're right. That startled her. You're not going to fight me on that? I've done enough fighting, he said quietly, and I lost the only thing that mattered because of it. The simplicity of that statement disarmed her. She looked at him, searching for the anger or pride that used to be there, but there was none. Just honesty. For a long moment, they stood there, two people who had once shared everything, Now unsure how to share even the air between them, Elena finally exhaled, her shoulders softening. "You really have changed," she said. He smiled faintly, a touch of sadness in it. "Took me long enough." The quiet that followed was gentler this time, not the sharp silence of confrontation, but the tender, uncertain stillness of people standing at the edge of something new. Rain trickled down from the roof in thin silver lines. The storm was ending, but the air still smelled like thunder. Elena turned slightly toward him, her voice low. "You can't expect me to trust you again." "I don't," he said. "I just hope that someday you'll believe that I mean what I said." She looked down, the corner of her mouth lifting, not a smile, but something close. "That's a dangerous kind of hope." "I've lived without hope before," he said. "It's not something I'd recommend." That made her laugh quietly, almost in spite of herself. It was the first real laugh of the night, small, tired, but real. Michael didn't move closer. He didn't need to. Something in the air had already shifted. The storm was over. The silence remained. But it was no longer a wall between them. It was a space, uncertain, delicate, waiting to see what would come next. The night had gone still again. Only the soft hiss of rain filled the silence now, the last breath of the storm sliding down the edges of the veranda roof. The air smelled of earth and memory, that unmistakable scent that comes after something wild has passed, but not yet settled. Elena leaned against the railing, her eyes on the garden that shimmered faintly under the wet lamplight. Michael stood a few feet away, his jacket still draped around her shoulders. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to argue about, only the quiet ache of everything that had been said. He looked at her, not with the urgency of someone wanting to reclaim what was lost, but with the reverence of someone finally realizing what it had meant. There was no performance in his expression anymore, no practiced lines, just the weary, hopeful honesty of a man trying to rebuild something fragile with empty hands. "You should probably go inside," he said softly. "You'll catch a chill." "I'm fine," she replied. "Besides, I'm not sure I'm ready to go back in there. Too many people pretending they've never broken each other's hearts." Michael smiled faintly. "You've always had a way with words." Elena's lips twitched, but her eyes stayed on the rain. "Words don't mean much when they come too late." He hesitated. "Then let me prove mine means something." She turned toward him, studying him for a moment. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped forward slowly, not closing the distance completely, just enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence again. His hand lifted halfway, then stopped. "Can I?" The question hung there, unfinished but understood. Elena hesitated. She could have said no. She could have walked away, and no one would have blamed her. But she didn't. The storm inside her had quieted to something smaller now, not gone, but no longer unbearable. So she nodded. Michael moved closer and wrapped his arms around her gently, carefully, like someone holding a memory instead of a person. For a moment, she didn't move, her body tense, uncertain. Then something in her gave way. She exhaled, long and slow, and let herself lean into him. The embrace wasn't passionate. It wasn't desperate. It was something older, quieter, the kind of touch that says, "I remember who we were, and I still see you." He rested his chin lightly against her hair. The warmth of him seeped through the thin fabric of his shirt, steady and grounding. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed the feeling of being held without demand, without expectation. "I used to dream about this," he murmured after a while. "Not the rain, not the timing, just this. Being near you again, even if it was only for a moment." Her voice came out muffled against his chest. "Dreams have a way of lying to us." "Maybe," he said. "But sometimes they tell the truth about what we still want." She didn't answer, but he felt the small, Involuntary movement of her fingers against his sleeve, the smallest hint that she wasn't ready to let go yet. The wind brushed against them, carrying the scent of damp roses. Somewhere behind the closed doors, a slow song began to play, distant, muffled, familiar. It was the same melody that had played at their first dance years ago. Elena let out a quiet, humorless laugh. The universe has a cruel sense of irony. Or a perfect one, Michael said softly. They stayed like that for a long time, saying nothing, holding on. The rain tapered to a drizzle, the sky bruised with the faintest suggestion of dawn beyond the clouds. When she finally stepped back, the air felt colder. Her eyes met his, and for the first time all night, there was no anger there, only exhaustion and a fragile sort of peace. "I should probably go inside," she said. He nodded. "Yeah," but neither of them moved. Then, quietly, she added, "Don't make promises this time. Just mean what you say." "I will," he said simply. And though nothing between them was resolved, something had shifted, like the moment after a storm, when the world still drips with rain but the air feels clean again. As she walked back toward the ballroom, Michael stayed behind, watching her go. His jacket still hung on her shoulders, and for the first time in years, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, not everything broken had to stay that way. The ballroom was nearly empty when Elena walked back inside. The band had packed up. The laughter had softened to a few lingering conversations and the clinking of glasses. The world had moved on while she was outside. She stood for a moment near the doorway, blinking under the warm glow of chandeliers. Her hair was damp, her heels muddy. Michael's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders like a secret she wasn't ready to explain. Her friend Clara caught her eye from across the room, gave a teasing smile, and raised an eyebrow as if to ask, "What happened?" Elena just shook her head faintly, a silent promise to explain later, or maybe never. She crossed to the refreshment table, poured herself a glass of water, and let the coolness calm her shaking hands. But no matter how she tried, she could still feel the weight of his embrace, the steadiness of it, the honesty in the silence they'd shared. She should have walked away for good. That was the logical choice, the safe one. But logic had never been what tied her to Michael. "Elena?" She turned. He stood in the doorway, framed by the soft spill of rainlight from outside. His shirt clung slightly to him, his hair damp, his expression unsure, as if he'd come to the edge of something, but didn't know whether to step forward or retreat. "You're still here," she said, surprised by how relieved she sounded. "I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye." She gave a small, tired smile. "You've gotten better at that." He walked toward her, slow, careful. The empty room made every step sound louder than it should. When he stopped a few feet away, they both hesitated, as though any wrong word might shatter the fragile peace they just built. "Elena," he said finally, "I don't want to undo your life. I know you've built something for yourself, and I have no right to ask for a place in it. But," he swallowed, his voice softening, "I'd like to earn one." She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You think it's that simple?" "No," he said, "but I think it's worth trying." Something inside her shifted then, not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. The man standing in front of her wasn't the boy who had left. He wasn't hiding behind pride or fear anymore. He was just present. "Michael," she said quietly, "if I let you back into my life, even a little, I need you to understand something." He nodded. "Anything." She stepped closer. "You don't get to disappear again. You don't get to run when it gets hard or when you're scared. If we do this, if there's even a chance we try again, you stay. Even when it's messy. Especially when it's messy." He met her gaze without hesitation. "I can do that. Don't say you can unless you mean it." "I mean it." Her eyes searched his for a long time, looking for cracks, for hesitation, for the old patterns she used to know. She didn't find them. There was still love there, yes, but something steadier now, humility, maybe even courage. She exhaled, half in disbelief. You really are different. He smiled faintly. I had a good reason to change. For a few moments, neither spoke. The silence between them felt lighter now, almost like a truce. Finally, Elena set down her glass. All right, she said. We'll start small. A coffee. Tomorrow morning. You show up, no grand gestures, no speeches. Just be there. Michael blinked, almost surprised. Coffee? She shrugged. Everyone deserves one cup of forgiveness. He laughed softly, the sound warming the space between them. You have no idea how much I've missed talking to you. I have some idea, she said, smiling despite herself. The faintest light of dawn began to creep through the tall windows, washing the empty room in pale gold. The rain had finally stopped, the air clear and quiet. Elena took a step back, her expression soft but resolute. Don't make me regret this. I won't, he said, and for once, she believed him as he turned to leave. He paused by the door, looking back one last time. Tomorrow? Tomorrow, she said, and just like that, something new began, not a rekindling of what had been, but the tentative first step toward what could be. For the first time in years, Elena didn't feel the ache of the past pulling her backward. She felt something else, lighter, riskier, alive. Hope. Morning arrived with the sky washed clean by the night storm. The city shimmered under the soft light of early sun, rain still clinging to window panes, leaves sparkling like they'd been reborn. Elena walked along the quiet street, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, the air cool against her skin. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, fragments of the night replayed in her mind. The rain, the confession, the silence that had somehow said more than words ever could. It should have left her unsettled, and it did, in some ways, but underneath the confusion was something gentler, something that felt a lot like peace. The small cafe on the corner came into view. She used to come here years ago, before everything had changed. The bell above the door chimed softly as she stepped inside, greeted by the familiar warmth of coffee and quiet chatter. He was already there. Michael sat by the window, his fingers wrapped around a mug, the morning light catching in his hair. He looked up when he saw her, and that same uncertain smile, the one that used to undo her, crossed his face. You came, he said. You showed up, she replied. That was the deal. She slipped into the seat across from him. For a moment, they just sat there, both aware of the strangeness of it all. Two people who had once known everything about each other, now relearning the rhythm of small talk. Coffee? He asked, gesturing toward the counter. I'll get my own, she said, standing before he could protest. Old habits, independence, boundaries still held. But when she returned with her cup, she smiled faintly. I forgot how good this place smells in the morning, he chuckled. You used to say it was your favorite kind of quiet. The kind that tastes like cinnamon and sounds like nothing urgent. She blinked, surprised he remembered. You really do hold on to details, don't you? Some, he said softly. The important ones. They fell into a rhythm after that, light conversation, gentle pauses, small smiles that filled the spaces words couldn't. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without weight. There were ghosts between them still, mistakes, silences, years that couldn't be rewritten, but for once, they didn't feel haunted by them. Instead, there was curiosity. So, she said after a while, tracing the rim of her cup. What happens now? Michael looked at her thoughtfully. We drink our coffee. Maybe talk about what we've been doing these last 3 years. And maybe see what happens after that. She arched an eyebrow. No grand declarations? He shook his head, smiling. No more storms. Just a start. Helena studied him for a long moment. The man sitting across from her was familiar but new. The same voice, the same eyes, but a steadier presence, quieter, less certain, more real. "I think I could live with that," she said. He tilted his head. "With what?" "With small starts." Outside sunlight broke fully through the clouds, spilling across the cafe floor. People hurried by, umbrellas folded, the world waking up again. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was standing at the end of something. She felt like she was standing at the beginning. Michael lifted his cup slightly. "To small starts, then." She smiled, raising hers. "To small starts." Their mugs clinked together softly, an ordinary sound, yet somehow sacred. They talked until the morning crowd thinned, until the hum of the city grew louder around them. Conversation flowed easily now, meandering between memories and new stories, laughter and silence. When it was finally time to leave, they stood by the door, the air cool again as it rushed in from the street. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. Elena hesitated for half a breath, then nodded. "Tomorrow." He smiled, not wide, not sure, but honest. "I'll be here." "I know," she said, and she meant it as she walked down the street. The wind lifted her hair, carrying the faint scent of coffee and rain. For the first time in years, her heart didn't feel heavy with what had been lost. It felt open, fragile, yes, but open. Behind her, Michael watched from the cafe window, not with longing this time, but with quiet gratitude. Whatever they were rebuilding wasn't about returning to the past. It was about learning how to meet each other again in the present, two people finally ready to stay and for the first time. Both of them believed it might just be enough.